ultimate target, your nervous system. Epstein-Barr Stage 4. The ultimate goal of the Epstein-Barr virus is to leave your thyroid and inflame your central nervous system. Your immune system normally wouldn't allow this to happen. But if EBV has successfully worn you down in stage 3 by entering your thyroid, and if on top of that you abruptly get clobbered with some physical or severe emotional injury, the virus will take advantage of your vulnerability and start to cause a multitude of strange symptoms that range from heart palpitations to generalized aches and pains to nerve pain. A common scenario is being in an accident, getting surgery or suffering some other physical damage, and then feeling awful for much longer than would be expected from the injury alone. A typical reaction is to feel like a truck hit me. Blood tests, X-rays, and MRIs will reveal nothing wrong, so doctors won't be aware of the virus inflaming the nerves. Stage 4 Epstein-Barr is therefore a major source of mystery illnesses, that is, problems that cause doctors massive confusion. What's actually happening is that your injured nerves trigger an alarm hormone to notify your body that the nerves are exposed and need repair. In stage 4, EBV detects that hormone and rushes over to latch onto those damaged nerves. A nerve is similar to a string of yarn with little root hairs hanging off it. When the nerve is injured, the root hairs pop off the sides of the nerve sheath. EBV looks for those openings and grabs onto them. If it succeeds, it can keep the area inflamed for years. As a result, you can have a relatively small injury that remains flared up and causes you continual pain. The issues that result from this viral inflammation can include muscle pain, joint pain, painful tender points, back pain, tingling and/or numbness in the hands and feet, migraines, ongoing fatigue, dizziness, eye floaters, insomnia, unrestful sleep, and night sweats. Patients with these issues are sometimes diagnosed as having fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, or rheumatoid arthritis, all of which are collections of symptoms that medical communities admit they don't understand and for which they have no cure. In such cases, the patients are given inappropriate treatments that don't begin to address the real culprit, because these mystery illnesses are really stage 4 Epstein-Barr. One of the greatest missteps of all time is mistaking women's Epstein-Barr symptoms for perimenopause and menopause. Symptoms such as hot flashes, night sweats, heart palpitations, dizziness, depression, hair loss, and anxiety were and are frequently misinterpreted as hormonal change, which is what launched the disastrous HRT movement. To learn more, see Chapter 15, Premenstrual Syndrome and Menopause. Let's take a closer look at the chronic illnesses that have puzzled doctors for decades and are the result of stage 4 Epstein-Barr. Chronic fatigue syndrome. There's a long history of womankind facing denial that there's a physical cause of their suffering. Like those with fibromyalgia, people with chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, also known by names such as myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, CFS, chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, CFIDS, and systemic exertion intolerance disease, SEID, often hear that they are liars, lazy, delusional, and/or crazy. It's an illness that affects women in disproportionately large numbers. And chronic fatigue syndrome is on the rise. It's becoming common for young women in college to return home mid-semester with the condition, unable to do anything but lie in bed. Contracting CFS as a woman in your late teens or early 20s can be particularly devastating as you watch friends move on with relationships and jobs, meanwhile feeling stuck and unable to live up to your potential. Women who get CFS in their 30s, 40s, or 50s have their own obstacles. While you're old enough at this point to have an established life and support network, you also have established responsibilities. You're likely trying to be everything to everybody, taking care of more than you can handle, and so you feel the pressure to act normal when CFS hits. Compounding the isolation for both age groups are the feelings of guilt, fear, and shame that accompany their misdiagnoses. I'm sure that if you have CFS, you've been in the depths of physical suffering and had someone say, "But you look perfectly healthy." It is so disheartening to feel unwell and hear from practitioners, friends, or family that there's nothing wrong with you. Chronic fatigue syndrome is real. It's the Epstein-Barr virus. As we've seen, those with CFS have an elevated viral load of EBV, which systematically afflicts the body by creating a neurotoxin that inflames the central nervous system. This can eventually weaken the adrenals and digestive system and create the feeling that you have a low battery. Fibromyalgia. We've had over 6 decades of medical denial that fibromyalgia is a legitimate problem. Now, medical communities are finally accepting it as an actual condition. The best explanation doctors are given by the establishment, though, is that fibromyalgia is overactive nerves. What this really translates to is no one has a clue. It's not the doctor's fault. There's no magic book they receive that tells them what will help their fibromyalgia patients or what is genuinely causing their pain. The medical system is still years from discovering the illness's true root because it's viral and it takes place at a nerve level that medical tools currently can't detect. Those suffering from fibromyalgia are under a very real and debilitating attack. It's the Epstein-Barr virus that is causing this disorder, inflaming both the central nervous system and nerves throughout the body, which creates ongoing pain, sensitivity to touch, severe fatigue, and a host of other issues. Tinnitus. Tinnitus, or ringing in the ear, is usually caused by EBV getting into the inner ear's nerve channel called the labyrinth. The ringing is the result of the virus inflaming and vibrating the labyrinth and the vestibulocochlear nerve. Vertigo and Meniere's disease. Vertigo and Meniere's disease are often attributed by doctors to calcium crystals or stones becoming disrupted in the inner ear. However, most chronic cases are actually caused by EBV's neurotoxin inflaming the vagus nerve. Other symptoms: anxiety, dizziness, chest tightness, chest pain, esophageal spasms, and asthma can also be caused by EBV inflaming the vagus nerve. Insomnia and tingling and numbness in hands and feet can be caused by phrenic nerves becoming perpetually inflamed by EBV. And heart palpitations can result from buildup of EBV's poisonous virus corpses and byproduct in the heart's mitral valve. If you have EBV or suspect you do, you may find the virus in stage 4 beyond frustrating. Take comfort. If you take the right steps, which medical communities don't know about yet, but which are covered at the end of this chapter, you can recover, rebuild your immune system, return to a normal state again, and regain control of your life. Types of Epstein-Barr. As I've noted earlier, there are over 60 varieties of the Epstein-Barr virus. That number is so large because EBV has existed for well over 100 years. It's had generations of people to move through, mutating and elevating its various hybrids and strains in that time. The strains can be organized into 6 groups of escalating severity with roughly 10 types per group. EBV Group 1 is the oldest and mildest. These versions of the virus typically take years, even decades, to transition from one stage to another. Their effects might not be noticeable until you're in your 70s or 80s, and then result in little more than back pain. They might even remain in your organs and never reach stage 3 or 4. EBV Group 2 moves from stage to stage a bit quicker than Group 1. You might notice symptoms in your 50s or 60s. These varieties may partially linger in the thyroid and send only some of their virus cells out to inflame nerves, resulting in relatively mild nerve inflammation. The only variety of EBV that medical communities are aware of is in this group. EBV group 3 will transition between stages faster than group 2, so its symptoms might be noticeable around age 40. Also, these viruses fully complete stage 4. That is, they entirely leave the thyroid to latch onto nerves. Viruses in this group can cause a variety of ills, including joint pain, fatigue, heart palpitations, tinnitus, and vertigo. EBV group 4 will create noticeable problems as early as age 30. Its aggressive actions on nerves can result in symptoms associated with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, brain fog, confusion, anxiety, moodiness, and everything caused by groups 1 to 3. This group can also create symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, even if a person never underwent any trauma beyond getting inflamed by the virus. EBV group 5 will create noticeable issues as early as age 20. This is an especially nasty form of the virus because it strikes just when a young person is setting out to start an independent life. It can create all the problems of group 4, and it feeds off negative emotions such as fear and worry. Doctors who can't find anything wrong and perceive these patients as young and healthy often declare, "It's all in your head," and send them to psychologists to convince them what's actually happening in their bodies isn't real. Unless, that is, a patient happens upon a doctor who's up on the Lyme disease trend, in which case the patient will probably walk away with a Lyme misdiagnosis. The worst type, however, is EBV group 6, which can strike hard even in young children. In addition to everything group 5 does, group 6 can create symptoms so severe that they're misdiagnosed as leukemia, viral meningitis, lupus, and more. Plus, it suppresses the immune system, which can lead to a wide variety of symptoms, including rashes, weakness in the limbs, and severe nerve pain. Healing from the Epstein-Barr virus. Because it's very easy to catch and hard to detect, and can cause a number of mysterious symptoms, you might understandably find the Epstein-Barr virus overwhelming and its effects disheartening. The good news is that if you carefully and patiently follow the steps detailed in this section and in part 4 of the book, you can heal. You can recover your immune system, free yourself of EBV, rejuvenate your body, gain full control over your health, and move on with your life. How long the process takes varies for each individual and depends on myriad factors. Some people conquer the virus in as little as 3 months. However, a more typical period is a full year, and there are some people who need 18 months or more to destroy EBV. Healing foods. Certain fruits and vegetables can help your body rid itself of EBV and heal from its effects. The following are the best ones to incorporate into your diet, listed in rough order of importance. Try to eat at least 3 of these foods per day, the more the better. Rotating your consumption so that in a given week or 2, you get all of these foods into your system. Wild blueberries help restore the central nervous system and flush EBV neurotoxins out of the liver. Celery strengthens hydrochloric acid in the gut and provides mineral salts to the central nervous system. Sprouts, high in zinc and selenium to strengthen the immune system against EBV. Asparagus cleanses the liver and spleen, strengthens the pancreas. Spinach creates an alkaline environment in the body and provides highly absorbable micronutrients to the nervous system. Cilantro removes heavy metals such as mercury and lead, which are favored foods of EBV. Parsley removes high levels of copper and aluminium, which feed EBV. Coconut oil, antiviral and acts as an anti-inflammatory. Garlic, antiviral and antibacterial that defends against EBV. Ginger helps with nutrient assimilation and relieves spasms associated with EBV. Raspberries, rich in antioxidants to remove free radicals from the organs and bloodstream. Lettuce stimulates peristaltic action in the intestinal tract and helps cleanse EBV from the liver. Papayas restore the central nervous system, strengthen and rebuild hydrochloric acid in the gut. Apricots, immune system rebuilders that also strengthen the blood. Pomegranates help detox and cleanse the blood as well as the lymphatic system. Grapefruit, rich source of bioflavonoids and calcium to support the immune system and flush toxins out of the body. Kale, high in specific alkaloids that protect against viruses such as EBV. Sweet potatoes help cleanse and detox the liver from EBV byproducts and toxins. Cucumbers strengthen the adrenals and kidneys and flush neurotoxins out of the bloodstream. Fennel contains strong antiviral compounds to fight off EBV. Healing herbs and supplements. The following herbs and supplements, listed in rough order of importance, can further strengthen your immune system and aid your body in healing from the virus's effects. Cat's claw, herb that reduces EBV and cofactors such as strep A and strep B. Silver hydrosol, lowers EBV viral load. Zinc, strengthens the immune system and protects the thyroid from EBV inflammation. Vitamin B12, as methylcobalamin and or adenosylcobalamin, strengthens the central nervous system. Licorice root lowers EBV production and strengthens the adrenals and kidneys. Lemon balm, antiviral and antibacterial, kills EBV cells and strengthens the immune system. 5-MTHF, 5-methyltetrahydrofolate, helps strengthen the endocrine system and central nervous system. Selenium strengthens and protects the central nervous system. Red marine algae, powerful antiviral that removes heavy metals such as mercury and reduces viral load. L-lysine lowers EBV load and acts as a central nervous system anti-inflammatory. Spirulina, preferably from Hawaii, rebuilds the central nervous system and eliminates heavy metals. Ester C strengthens the immune system and flushes EBV toxins from the liver. Nettle leaf provides vital micronutrients to the brain, blood, and central nervous system. Monolaurin, antiviral, breaks down EBV load and reduces cofactors. Elderberry, antiviral, strengthens the immune system. Red clover cleanses the liver, lymphatic system, and spleen of neurotoxins from EBV. Star anise, antiviral, helps destroy EBV in the liver and thyroid. Curcumin, component of turmeric that helps strengthen the endocrine system and central nervous system. Case history. A career almost lost to Epstein-Barr. Michelle and her husband Matthew both had high-paying corporate jobs. Michelle was a star at her firm and made a point of going to work throughout her pregnancy, leaving only when she was about to go into labor. After giving birth, Michelle instantly fell in love with her new son, Jordan. She couldn't have been happier. I have it all now, she thought. A career I love and a family I love even more. But Michelle's bright future started to dim when she was struck with a fatigue she couldn't shake. No matter how many vitamins she took or how much she exercised, she felt run down all the time. So Michelle visited her doctor. After giving her a physical, he dismissed her concerns. You look fine to me. It's natural for a new baby to be exhausting. Just get more sleep and don't worry about it. Michelle took care to sleep more. After another week, she felt worse than ever. Suspecting a post-pregnancy issue, Michelle went to see her OBGYN. This doctor drew her blood for a number of tests, including several for thyroid disease. When the lab results came in, the OBGYN correctly diagnosed Michelle as having Hashimoto's. That is, her thyroid was no longer producing the level of hormones needed. Michelle was put on thyroid medication to get her hormone levels back to normal. This made her feel a little better, though not quite as well as she had before her pregnancy. She had been aiming to return to work a month after having her son, and now she had to postpone those plans. After about 6 months, Michelle's fatigue was back and much more severe. That's when Michelle's troubles really began. Soon she had trouble taking care of Jordan. Matthew agreed to help out until she felt better. Instead, Michelle grew worse. On top of being tired, she started to feel aches and pains, especially in her joints. Michelle returned to her OBGYN, who ran another set of tests. The lab results showed nothing wrong. Thanks to the thyroid medication Michelle was continuing to take, her thyroid levels were perfect. So were all her vitamin and mineral levels. The OBGYN was baffled. Suspecting that Michelle's symptoms were related to her thyroid condition, the OBGYN referred Michelle to a top endocrinologist, a doctor who specializes in hormonal issues. The specialist conducted a thorough thyroid profile and tested Michelle's other hormone levels from a variety of angles. He ended up telling Michelle she had mild adrenal fatigue. There was some small truth to that. Michelle's adrenal glands were being strained by the Epstein-Barr virus, which her pregnancy had triggered and which was now inflaming her thyroid. The endocrinologist told Michelle to take it easy and avoid stress. On his recommendation, Michelle handed off the freelance consulting projects she'd been working on from home. In reality, Michelle's job had nothing to do with her condition. Her source of stress wasn't her work, but the illness that was eating away at her life, and her seeming helplessness to understand it or do anything about it. Michelle continued to get worse. Her knees flared up and swelled, making it difficult to walk. She bought knee supports and decided to pursue help more aggressively. Michelle's intuition told her an invader was present in her body, so she went to see an infectious disease specialist. This would be precisely the right thing to do if infectious disease doctors actually knew how to recognize and treat past infections of EBV. Unfortunately, they don't. So after running an exhausting battery of tests and noticing that Michelle had an antibody from a past EBV infection, he dismissed it as a problem right away. This doctor told her she was physically fit. He added that she might be depressed and offered to refer her to a psychiatrist. Infuriated at being made to feel she was crazy for trying to address what she deeply sensed was a real physical problem, Michelle, painfully, rose and strode out of the room. With increasing desperation, Michelle now visited doctors across the spectrum. They put her through ultrasounds, X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, and loads of blood tests. She was told she had candida, fibromyalgia, MS, lupus, Lyme disease, and rheumatoid arthritis. None of it was right. She was put on immunosuppressant drugs, antibiotics, and loads of different supplements. None of the treatments helped. Michelle became an insomniac, suffered heart palpitations, and developed chronic vertigo that caused dizziness and nausea. She dropped from 140 to 115 pounds. Soon, Michelle was spending most of her days in bed. She was wasting away. Her husband, Matthew, was terrified. After Michelle had spent 4 years exploring all other options, and based on the recommendation of the naturopath Michelle visited, Matthew called my office as a last resort. When my assistant answered, Matthew burst into tears. "What's wrong?" she asked. He replied, "My wife is dying." For our first appointment, Matthew planned to do most of the talking while sitting next to Michelle, who was in bed. Less than a minute after Matthew started telling me Michelle's story, I interrupted him. "It's okay," I said. "Spirit tells me it's an aggressive form of the Epstein-Barr virus." The virus's neurotoxin was inflaming all of Michelle's joints. Her insomnia and foot pain were the result of her phrenic nerves being perpetually inflamed. Her vertigo stemmed from EBV's neurotoxin inflaming her vagus nerve, and her heart palpitations were being caused by buildup of EBV virus corpses and viral byproduct in her mitral valve. "Don't worry," I told Michelle and Matthew. "I know how to beat this virus." Michelle exclaimed with as much joyful energy as she could muster. I knew it was a virus. It was the first critical step in her recovery. I recommended a blend of celery juice and papaya, which is great for boosting someone in Michelle's condition. For example, low weight, not being able to eat, high number of virus cells. I followed that up with the recommendations for healing in this chapter, including a list of helpful supplements, as well as the recommendations from part 4, how to finally heal. The cleanse diet immediately stopped feeding Michelle's EBV. Within a week, there was a noticeable reduction of the swelling in her knees. The L-lysine shut down Michelle's vertigo, and the other supplements started killing virus cells and or dampening the production of new ones. In 3 months, Michelle was regularly up and walking again. In 9 months, she was once again working part-time at her challenging corporate job. And in 18 months, Michelle's pain and suffering were just a memory. She'd taken control over EBV. Today, Michelle has fully recovered her health. She's returned to juggling her job and her family energetically and happily. Case history. An end to CFS confinement. Cynthia was a mother of 2. Shortly after her youngest, Sophie, was born, Cynthia began experiencing fatigue. It took everything she had to push through the day, and she relied on increasing her coffee intake just to function. Within a few years, she had to quit her part-time job at a clothing store because long naps were taking up her afternoons. She needed the rest so she could be strong enough to meet her kids at the school bus, make dinner, and help them with their homework. Cynthia noticed herself becoming irritable, and arguments often arose with her husband, Mark, who didn't understand why she was tired all the time. After all, the tests that Cynthia's doctor had run indicated nothing was wrong. The doctor said she was healthy and concluded that maybe she was just unhappy or depressed. This made Cynthia want to walk out of the doctor's office without another word. Any blue mood she experienced was because she was tired all the time and could barely function, not the other way around. Yet her husband sided with the doctor and became increasingly resentful toward her. The ongoing stress put Cynthia on overload. Life felt impossible to keep up with. She couldn't find the energy to brush her hair, and the mere thought of running the vacuum cleaner or washing the dishes exhausted her. From the outside, it looked like she was giving up on life. Mark got angrier. He was talking separation now. I work too long and hard at the office all day to worry about taking care of things at home, he said. This is supposed to be your department. Cynthia felt more pressure than ever to get better, but the worries about her marriage and what would happen to her children put her fatigue at an all-time high. She could barely drive to the grocery store to make dinner for her family. All she could do was lie in bed or on the couch. This is what a moderate to severe case of undiagnosed chronic fatigue syndrome can look like. When Cynthia called me, her life had fallen apart. Her husband had left her, and her daughter Sophie, now 7 years old, and her son Ryan, aged 9, had lost their family unit. What her doctor had misconstrued as a psychiatric condition was an actual physical problem, Epstein-Barr virus. The same story applies to far too many women. I set to work informing Cynthia that she had a case of EBV that her doctor had missed. With an emphasis on getting her viral load under control and addressing nutritional deficiencies, I laid out the background on CFS that I described earlier in this chapter, and I explained the protocols outlined here and in part 4. Like her life depended on it, because it did, Cynthia followed Spirit's advice. Slowly, Cynthia began to get better. Her adrenals recovered normal function, and her stamina returned. Once again, she could tend to her children, run errands, keep the house in shape, and do her hair, all without the gallons of coffee she used to rely on. Cynthia finally had the energy to return to work, too. After witnessing this change in his wife, Mark called Cynthia and asked her out to dinner. His mother would look after the kids, he said. When they arrived at the fancy restaurant, which had long ago been the deli where they had flirted as college students, Mark told Cynthia he had called ahead and ordered a special healing food meal for her, and that he had ordered the same for himself, out of solidarity. Over sun-dried tomato hummus and vegetable nori rolls, Mark didn't exactly cry. Some things would always stay the same. But he did have to dab at his eyes as he apologized for how he had behaved. Cynthia was quiet, then answered with a playful smile, "You can make it up to me." After a few weeks of testing the waters, Cynthia wanted to make sure Mark didn't want her back as a security blanket and housekeeper. They moved back in together as a family. Mark now wakes up every Saturday morning so he can get to the farmer's market before they run out of salad greens. Case history. Fibro pain forgotten. Stacy, a 41-year-old part-time receptionist in a doctor's office, had been married to Rob, who worked at a car dealership for over 15 years. She never had the energy to keep up with the outings Rob planned with their daughters. In fact, she couldn't remember ever feeling that well. She always felt slightly achy and a bit more tired than her friends seemed to be. And since she'd given birth to her second child, who was now 11, the fatigue and muscle soreness had been more pronounced. One weekend, while Rob and the kids were at a museum, she went for a longer walk than usual. She had decided to push herself to lose some unwanted weight she had gained in the last few years. Afterward, she noticed an unusual pain in her left knee. Thinking back to her college basketball coach's advice to walk it off, she tried to ignore it. It didn't go away. 2 weeks later, she scheduled time for an exam with a doctor at her office. Stacy limped out of the appointment with a prescription for an MRI, which revealed nothing visibly wrong with her knee. Because Stacy's balance was off from leaning on her good leg, she found herself tripping easily. Stairs, curbs, and corners of rugs had become major obstacles. Then her right knee started to hurt, even though it hadn't gotten injured in any of her falls, and exams showed nothing amiss. Stacy's worry escalated to fear. Something was really wrong. The doctors in her office ruled out rheumatoid arthritis, though, and guessed that the extra 30 pounds Stacy was carrying were to blame for her pain. Soon, Stacy started to hurt in other places. Now she couldn't raise her hands over her head without her arms and neck hurting. She was unable to work anymore, and depression set in as she started to spend hours at home on the sofa. At night, Rob would make dinner for the family and send their daughter to serve Stacy her plate of food on the couch. A specialist concluded that Stacy had fibromyalgia. When Stacy asked what caused it, the doctor responded, "We don't know. It's what we think is oversensitive nerves." This should help, though. She handed Stacy a prescription for a medicine popular for treating depression and fibromyalgia pain. At her next visit to the specialist, when Stacy reported no progress, the doctor referred her to me. After I explained what her fibromyalgia really was, that the real cause was the Epstein-Barr virus, and that it had been in her system since childhood, Stacy recalled having a bout of mononucleosis at age 14. She finally felt she had a real answer. She understood now that poor diet, nutritional deficiencies, and increased stress had triggered the formerly dormant EBV to surface as fibromyalgia. Not knowing what was wrong with her, the powerlessness, had been scarier than knowing the true cause. The mystery of her mystery illness had been the hardest part. Now she had direction and felt confident in her ability to heal. Within 6 months of our first call, following the same suggestions I describe in this chapter and part 4, How to Finally Heal, she was free from fibromyalgia, back to work and living life again. She told me she felt happier and healthier than ever, and that she had planned the next family outing, apple picking at an organic orchard. Knowledge is power. The first step of the healing process is to know the cause of your suffering is Epstein-Barr and to realize it's not your fault. Your EBV-related health problems aren't the result of anything you did wrong or any moral failing. You didn't make this happen, and you're in no way to blame. You did not manifest this. You did not attract this. You're a vibrant, wonderful human being, and you have every God-given right to heal. You deserve to heal. Much of EBV's effectiveness stems from hiding in the shadows so that neither you nor your body's immune system can sense its presence. This not only allows it to commit its mayhem unchecked, it leads to negative emotions such as guilt, fear, and helplessness. Now things are different for you. If you have EBV, you now have a mind-body understanding of what's causing your health problems. From this alone, your immune system will strengthen and the virus will naturally weaken. So when it comes to fighting EBV in a very real sense, knowledge is power. Chapter 4. Multiple sclerosis. Since medical science first identified multiple sclerosis, MS, grave confusion has accompanied the condition. Every year, far too many people receive an MS misdiagnosis. In the 1950s, 1960s, and early 1970s, the prevalence of mystery neurological symptoms in women was escalating. Yet doctors interpreted their conditions as menopause, hormonal imbalance, or just plain psychosis. Women had an almost impossible time finding a medical professional who would validate their pain, tremors, fatigue, vertigo, and more as real symptoms. The only women who could get doctors to take them seriously on the subject were either wealthy or of advanced age. It wasn't until enough men presented with the same symptoms in the 1960s and 1970s that the medical establishment began to take all of these mystery neurological symptoms seriously. As with many other illnesses, a man's word was taken over a woman's. Doctors were overwhelmed by the diagnostic task, though, and turned to the label MS. Multiple sclerosis is most notable for inflaming and damaging the central nervous system's protective layer and message facilitator called the myelin sheath. Your nerves carry electrical signals that direct all the parts of your body. When any portion of your myelin sheath is damaged, the messages from the nerves underneath it can become scrambled, wreaking a wide assortment of havoc, depending on which areas of the nervous system are inflamed. MS can lead to muscle pain and spasms, weakness and fatigue, mental problems, vision problems, hearing problems, dizziness, depression, digestive issues, and bladder and bowel dysfunction. It can also partly or completely paralyze legs, forcing you to use a cane, crutches, or even a wheelchair. Around 150,000 Americans a year, 85% of whom are women, are actually struck by multiple sclerosis, and roughly another 150,000 a year are misdiagnosed as having MS when they really have something else. More about this shortly. Receiving a diagnosis of MS can turn your world upside down, and it can be especially devastating when the diagnosis is wrong. This chapter reveals the truth about MS and how you can move past it and take back your life. Identifying multiple sclerosis. If you have multiple sclerosis, the damage to your central nervous system's myelin sheath and the resulting nerve inflammation and scarring is likely to create most of the following symptoms. Still, realize that you can have many of these symptoms but not have multiple sclerosis. Only if you have the worst forms of these might your condition be MS. Early on, eye issues, such as blurred vision, double vision, diminished perception of color, eye pain, and/or complete loss of vision, usually in one eye at a time. Chronic weakness and fatigue. Chronic pain, especially in muscles throughout the body. Tremors, numbness in the arms and/or legs, first on one side of the body and then the other. Weakness or paralysis in the legs that leads to trouble walking or, in severe cases, becoming confined to a wheelchair. Mental fogginess, such as difficulty concentrating. Memory issues, slurred speech. Beyond this symptoms checklist, there are no definitive tests to pinpoint MS. That's in part why there are so many medical misdiagnoses of the disease. If you match at least 6 of the most critical symptoms above in a serious, pronounced form, and if your doctor has ruled out other possible causes for them, you can try to confirm that you have MS by asking a neurologist to perform an MRI looking for lesions. that is, scarring or other damage, on the myelin sheath in the areas of the brain and spinal cord. If 2 or more lesions are found, it's evidence that your symptoms could be the result of multiple sclerosis. That said, lesions are very difficult to spot even with medical science's current 3D imaging tools, and that's not likely to change until around the year 2030. So if your neurologist can't find any lesions, that doesn't mean they don't exist. Another thing to consider is whether you've had a history of ear infections, throat infections, sinus infections, and/or if you are a woman, vaginal infections. These all will typically occur in childhood and early adulthood, before the development of multiple sclerosis. One other way to get a sense of what's ailing you is to better understand what MS actually is. What multiple sclerosis really is. Medical communities believe multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease resulting from your immune system somehow confusing areas of your nerve sheath with invaders and attacking them. As I say in other chapters, this is a philosophy that will hold back the truth in medical research for decades. The human body does not attack itself. Pathogens are to blame. Medical communities also believe that there's no resolution for MS. They are mistaken here too. The truth is that multiple sclerosis can be healed, and that it is actually a version of the Epstein-Barr virus. As explained in Chapter 3, EBV is a virus that chronically inflames nerves. Most strains of EBV are mild and less aggressive, but its multiple sclerosis varieties eat away at the myelin sheath, which is what creates the distinct set of symptoms associated with this disease. As for your immune system, not only is it innocent of any wrongdoing, it's your primary defense against MS. When your immune system gets what it needs, recovery is possible and within reach. Something else that distinguishes MS from other forms of EBV is that it's accompanied by a unique combination of bacteria, fungi, and heavy metals. Specifically, if you have MS, you'll typically have the following EBV cofactors in your system: Streptococcus A and Streptococcus B bacteria, H. pylori bacteria, or at least a previous case of H. pylori, Candida fungus, cytomegalovirus, the heavy metals copper, mercury, and aluminium. These metals weaken the immune system's ability to protect the body from viral nerve damage. While these cofactors help give MS its particular characteristics, at its core, multiple sclerosis is just a form of EBV, and knowing this illuminates any dark mysteries surrounding the illness. While EBV can be dangerous in some cases, Chapter 3 lays out in detail what you need to understand it, including the steps you can take to end the damage the virus is causing and eliminate nearly all of the virus and its cofactors. Healing from multiple sclerosis. Doctors typically treat multiple sclerosis using immunosuppressant drugs and steroids in the mistaken belief that your immune system is the problem. However, your immune system is not attacking you. A virus is. Your only hope of killing your EBV is a strong and vibrant immune system, which these medications are designed to weaken. So not only are these drugs failing to help you defeat EBV, they're significantly aiding the virus. The best approach is to read Chapter 3 to fully understand EBV. Because the strains of EBV causing multiple sclerosis are especially aggressive toward your myelin sheath, the following supplements are recommended specifically for MS. They'll help reduce pain and protect your myelin sheath as you heal from EBV. EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and docosahexaenoic acid, omega-3 fats to help protect and fortify the myelin nerve sheath. Be sure to buy a plant-based, not fish-based version. L-glutamine, amino acid that removes toxins such as MSG from the brain and protects neurons. Lion's mane, medicinal mushroom that helps protect the myelin sheath and support neuron function. ALA, alpha lipoic acid, helps repair damaged neurons and neurotransmitters. Also helps mend the myelin nerve sheath. Monoleurin, fatty acid that kills virus cells, bacteria cells, and other bad microbes, for example, mold, in the brain. Curcumin, component of turmeric that reduces inflammation of the central nervous system and relieves pain. Barley grass juice extract powder contains micronutrients that feed the central nervous system. Also helps feed brain tissue, neurons, and the myelin nerve sheath. Understand that MS is not a life sentence. If a doctor has given you an accurate diagnosis, there's no reason to fear it. And most likely, if you've heard you have MS, you were one of the many-handed and misdiagnosis. The real culprit behind your symptoms may be EBV, just not a strain that causes lesions on the myelin nerve sheath. If you stick to the recommendations in this section, and most importantly comply with all of the pertinent advice in Chapter 3 and Part 4 to restore your central nervous and immune systems, then typically within 3 to 18 months, depending on various factors such as your current state of health, you'll rid yourself of nearly all of the virus inflaming your nerves and be able to resume a normal and symptom-free life. Case history. Nursed back to health by the truth. Rebecca, age 41, was a nurse in a hospital emergency room. One afternoon at the end of a long shift, another nurse didn't show up for work, and so Rebecca had to work another 12 hours late into the night. As she was driving home to relieve her mother of babysitting her 10-year-old son Nicholas, the right side of Rebecca's face went numb. The numbness began to travel down her arm. She had never experienced anything like it before, though she had witnessed it in many patients over the years. Rebecca tried to pass it off as a symptom of overwork, though, and went to bed when she got home, hoping it would be gone by morning. When she awoke, the numbness was still there, on the right side of her face, her nose, part of her mouth, and her arm and hand. Concerned that it was a stroke, Rebecca's mother drove her to the hospital. A doctor she knew looked at her immediately and ran a series of tests, including an MRI with contrast and an EKG. The tests didn't show any problems, so the doctor didn't think it was a stroke. She suspected anxiety was the culprit. "Give it some time and we'll see if the symptoms ease up," she said, handing Rebecca a prescription for benzodiazepine. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca experienced very little change. She tried to get along with her mystery numbness, but it was a distraction. Her right arm began to weaken. Eventually, she felt she couldn't handle her normal nursing duties, which included transporting people from stretchers and lifting various pieces of medical equipment. She decided to take a leave of absence and asked the hospital's top neurologist for a consult. After a slew of comprehensive tests, he told her it was the beginning of multiple sclerosis, even though Rebecca's MRI and brain scan showed no evidence of the disease. The neurologist said Rebecca should start to receive regular MRIs. Over time, the MS would appear on the imaging if it progressed. Until then, he prescribed medications used to treat MS, such as immunosuppressant drugs and steroids. Rebecca could barely contain a sob as she went to meet her mother in the waiting room. How was she going to take care of Nicholas? Over the next 6 months, her symptoms progressed. Now the numbness was accompanied by dizzy spells, fatigue, and, after the latest MRI with contrast, brain fog. One day, a nurse Rebecca had worked with, who was a client of mine, recommended that Rebecca call me and make an appointment. First thing in the reading, Spirit informed me that Rebecca had a viral condition, a specific strain of EBV. "But I've been tested for the Epstein-Barr virus," Rebecca said. "It showed I didn't have a present infection in my blood, only an indication that I had an infection decades ago. That wouldn't be causing my problems now. I explained that the EBV antibodies in the blood aren't necessarily an indication that the virus has left someone's system, but rather that it's traveled deeper into the body. In Rebecca's case, the Epstein-Barr was alive indeed, and now affecting her central nervous system. I assured Rebecca that she didn't have multiple sclerosis. I'd give anything to believe that, she said. It's the truth, I told her, and went on to describe how, in addition to the central nervous system, the EBV was inflaming her phrenic and trigeminal nerves, which accounted for the numbness. The virus was also releasing a neurotoxin that caused the dizziness, fatigue, and brain fog. Finally, Rebecca was convinced. It's like a weight has been lifted. By following the protocols outlined in this chapter and in part 4, Rebecca made a complete recovery within 6 months. She was free from her medication and returned to her position at the hospital. She no longer works overtime because she feels that the stress from the extra shifts depleted her and allowed the EBV to take advantage. Just understanding how her condition worked and discovering that it wasn't a life sentence made every difference to Rebecca's healing. She told me that without the knowledge of what was actually behind her mystery illness, she's sure she would have been carrying around the wrong diagnosis for the rest of her life. Chapter 5. Rheumatoid arthritis.